Okay, cool. Here we go. So I just want to say something from the very get-go, which is that I have a lot more than 10 minutes of material, even in what I prepared for tonight, just to get us started. Anytime I'm in a venue like this, I just wanted to let you all know I am really, really happy to share slides. I'm happy to share resources. Please just connect with me. So I will go at a pretty fast clip and I'll try to watch that 10-minute mark and probably just cut myself a little bit short. There's all these things I wanted to talk about, even as I know it's really a time for us just to get together and connect and share about practice. But I often enjoy just sharing a little bit about tools and things that have really made a difference for me in my practice. So just to say that from the beginning, there's gonna be lots of information on the couple slides that I'll look at with you all. And if there's anything you find interesting, you want to just kind of dig in more, please let me know. I'll send you these slides. Really, I think for us, just in the session for tonight, I think is thinking about just how do we engage students in moral and intellectual virtue education in taught courses. And it's interesting once you get into kind of thinking about what virtue acquisition might look like. There's all sorts of ways you might actually expand thinking outside of the classroom too. I think it naturally starts making us think those things. But I'll start by tonight and starting our conversation thinking about in our classrooms, obviously, as the title suggests. I'll talk a little bit about my context because the way I've kind of seen it too is it's so important to actually think about and see what context we're teaching in and what this really looks like based on different types of courses we might be teaching. I teach in a context where I'm working with students every day in a kind of intensive environment, and sometimes that's going to be very different depending on how we're teaching. And I hope to kind of explore with you all some of the research that has really, really helped and informed my practice. And of course, at the end, and I hope the majority of what we do today is just inviting each other to connect and continue the conversation. And maybe we'll all collaborate from this point on. So I did just want to say a little bit about my unique context. As you saw, I teach ethics. It's 11th grade course, required course. It is a philosophical ethics course, but it occurs at a high school and actually within a Department of Leadership Education. So all sorts of things that make that really interesting. You'll see that like our institution does have certain virtues and values that are actually kind of like set from the institution. You see there the cardinal virtues of courage, moderation, justice, and wisdom, and then these additional values of service, honor, duty, truth. There's a ton of flexibility from there, but in a sense, actually, the reason I share that is I think one of the things that's been powerful for me in kind of virtue education is thinking about how we can actually leverage some of those high level, say maybe skills and virtues that are actually kind of espoused by our institutions and trying to think about how we might actually bring those out in our classrooms. And so how this all fits within leadership education for us, we're really rooted in a transformational leadership approach, which is one that's all about actually not just raising, in a sense, people's productivity or motivation, but that they also raise each other to higher levels of, as you see here from James Gregor Burns, higher levels of, say, morality. Someone like, for example, Martin Luther King is this kind of idea of like a value-centered or kind of ethical transformational leader. So, all to say, like I said, these are actually some things that are actually given to us from our institution. And then like I said, I suggest for all of us as we engage in this, there could be some really cool ways to actually think about, like I said, what some of the overarching kind of values that might actually be happening in our institutions and see how we, especially in philosophy classrooms, can actually, I think, help students engage in the kind of reflection and practice that would actually make those come alive and maybe uniquely. So one thing I wanted to say is that when you start thinking about virtue education, I think many of you know this, is you might then start thinking about what it might look like to form moral character or intellectual character. And this is where I'll just share some really helpful resources that have helped me so much. So first is at the University of Birmingham in the UK, the Jubilee Center for Character and Virtues has done really, really interesting, in my opinion, really important work in especially kind of a neo-Aristotelian kind of model of character education and both moral and intellectual virtue education. I've been very inspired by them. And so even, of course, for us, for many of us, this might be a pretty kind of simple or a pretty foundational idea, but that idea that character teaching character education is actually doing virtue education, doing virtue and character strengths education. I think there's some really nice language actually from the University of Birmingham to that end. And to also just say, I think what's been interesting in our course context, I mean, sorry, not our course context, I mean, yes, in a sense, but also our school context, is just actually, in a sense, clarifying what we're doing when we're talking about virtues and character strengths. And so we've done some work actually to just even be clear about what those virtues really look like. And so for us, we're influenced by, in some ways, what we hope to be influenced very much by the Aristotelian tradition, but then also some interesting things happening in kind of positive psychology, also just general kind of study of pro-social behaviors. So for us, virtues are dispositions to act and feel in certain ways that are beneficial both to the self and to the wider community. And we hope that we're starting to think about as well ways in which these would be intercultural. And then character strengths. And I think this is for us in our programming has been really helpful. I think it might be an interesting conversation for us to all have. Character strengths has been really helpful for us as language to think about how we actually, if we're thinking about how we're going to teach for the virtues, how do we maybe actually make them come alive through something like character strengths? And that's very much coming from the positive psychology world. Character strengths are the psychological mechanisms, distinguishable clusters of thought, feeling, behavior, and action that display one or another of the virtues. So you'll see in how I talk about how we kind of, in a sense, I hope bring kind of virtue education alive. We hope to bring some of the best of what's happening in positive psychology to bear. I won't say too much more about this, just to say that again, and it's just a theme. I'll say that I've really appreciated actually kind of working from some of a good foundation for us in kind of virtues and values education and trying to bring it into the classroom in a much more intentional way. And I already shared a little bit about so this model. Sorry, I didn't share so much here, but so this model, the VIA strengths kind of system, the VIA strengths classification, developed in 2004. Really interesting things going on with it. Lots that is continue. It's an evolving, in a sense, kind of model in some ways. You'll see that there are kind of the virtues of wisdom, courage, moderation, and wisdom, the cardinal virtues. And then there's also the virtues of humanity and transcendence. Those are these kind of theorized stable dispositions to act and feel in certain ways that the kind of team of researchers that developed this in the early 2000s, they did some work to make it intercultural, but there's questions there. But I'll say that just in general, though, to have these character strengths come out of each one of those virtues and be kind of identifiable, kind of practicable behaviors for each one of those virtues has been really helpful for some of the things I'll mention in just a moment. And these have been implemented actually before my time, even at Culver. We've been using the VIA strengths in all sorts of ways. So we can talk more about that if that comes up in Q&A. I will say that just in our context, we've really taken to heart the idea kind of coming from Aristotle that the end of ethics is action, not knowledge, come from the Nicomachean Ethics. And so what I'll say in kind of my remaining comments is what would it be like for us in philosophy classes to give our students additional tools? We do an amazing, amazing job with doing really careful and thoughtful reflection, dialogue, obviously philosophical dialogue, but also maybe drawing from some other things that we know kind of help people actually set intentions and develop, say, habits, kind of in the Aristotelian vein. What are some things we can do to also kind of foster intellectual and moral virtue growth, say, among our students? Of course, too, I'll say that you'll see that in my strain of kind of virtues and character education, there's this idea that what's going to distinguish whether something is a virtue or not is really all about whether it's the kind of set of pro-social kind of behaviors, thoughts, feelings, actions that are connected to, say, that concept of human flourishing, that concept of eudaimonia. So I've really drawn from a lot of different places in this regard. I'm connected with a group. It's called the Leadership for Flourishing Community of Practice. It's both at the Oxford Character Project and the Harvard Human Flourishing Program. And there's all sorts of really interesting work being done about really clarifying what this idea of human flourishing is. And of course, obviously virtues and character being a central component of that. Again, I want to just watch my time a little bit. I got so many things I wanted to say, so I wanted to just kind of quickly start the conversation with some resources. I think I'll actually skip that slide. One thing I wanted to say and kind of probably end with is um, I think one of the things that is one of the most powerful things we do in our programming, and I've published a bit on this and presented a lot on it, written a couple papers. If you're interested, I'm happy to send those your way. Is in amidst a it amidst a kind of philosophical ethics course, we also give students the opportunity to set intentions for growth that they're hoping to achieve with respect to a kind of set of virtues and character strengths. So we use those VIA strengths as our beginning set, but you could actually use all sorts of different lists. You could, I don't know, I guess if you wanted to, you could use Aristotle's list of virtues that come up in the Nicomachean Ethics. What we do actually is we give them a structured routine over a week where there's the kind of there's the course topics that we're involved in and engaged in, but then also students each week are setting an intention. Say, for example, they want to, because of certain circumstances coming up in their life and things that are happening for them, they set an intention of wanting to improve with respect to the virtue of wisdom. And so they set to say, I'm going to actually try to focus on love of learning and curiosity, two strengths that come under the virtue of wisdom. And they think about different kinds of behaviors. We actually look at some behavior, different kinds of things from the VIA Institute about ways that they might actually practice those behaviors. They set an intention, then they collect notes and think about what does that virtue really mean to them? What does the kind of excess or the deficiency look like? And that gets a little interesting from the Aristotelian perspective, but we can kind of think about with several of the virtues, what might an excess or a deficiency look like? What might that golden mean look like? And you have students reflect throughout the entire process. And we do that in our course actually 9 times. So students really get a sense of so while the kind of course itself is happening and we're doing a lot of that good deep reading, reflection, thinking about these virtues and character strengths, in a sense, having an enacted, practiced virtue ethics happening at the same time, where students are actually engaging in assessments, process assessments in many cases, but assessments that really are kind of giving them a sense of how they're developing and growing. So just this tool comes from the Jubilee Center. And I think it's really helpful. It's coming from that Bruner kind of classical progressive model of education where our aim is for growth. We kind of make our aim is growth in the intellectual and moral virtues in our classes. We could give them, in addition to, as you see here, there's kind of several different elements of growth. You'll see reflection analysis, formulation of personal theories as one component. That's a lot of the things we can do in our classrooms. Outside of our classrooms, we're hoping actually some of what we're doing has impacts and matters for our students outside the classroom. So we're hoping actually that maybe there's personal experience and practice, information gathering and intention and documentation. Those are actually, we build that into the structure of the character lab. The students are collecting data and collecting evidence of what have been the successes and challenges of actually trying to implement their particular virtue practice. We know that any kind of growth would be very, very small since it's just a week. But if you give them actually, and I work with high schoolers, for them, there's actually can be really amazing kind of growth that can happen over, say, a 9-week class. And what's powerful about this, and I'll actually go here, and again, I know this is so much information super fast. So like I said, just let me know. I'll send you these slides so you can dig into them more. You can kind of like organize here where if you'll see here a couple things for each one of these stages, you can have students engaging in different kinds of reflection. So first, for personal experience, like let's say you chose courage as your module, as your practice module for a week, you could first start with that personal experience, like who's a courageous person you've seen in a movie or read about in a book? When have you been courageous? Really activating that initial personal experience stage. Then the investigation stage, you maybe like do an interview with someone that you find to be particularly courageous. And then, for example, you might actually do investigation with, say, the course readings, like what does Aristotle say? What does Confucius say? All sorts of ways you might do that. And then similarly, you can, depending on how you kind of do it, I mean, that reflection and conceptual analysis might happen in class too, where we're talking about Aristotle and Confucius, say, in class as well. And then in that informed practice stage, you're hoping that actually maybe there's like an intention setting. They're like, well, let's try this out, see how it goes, and then we reflect again maybe the next week. So I'll say that in this case, you can actually see the module then expanding out. You can kind of do this multiple times as well. Just to say, if this kind of thing is interesting to you, I co-authored a paper with several people at Notre Dame, some similar things with transformative learning goals and assessments at University of Notre Dame in the God and the Good Life course. If you're interested, I can definitely get that to you as well. Okay, super, super fast. I know I've already gone over time, so I'm just gonna say, I'll say that these are really, really helpful for me as well, and really thinking about, in a sense, how do we already we're doing really good good things in philosophy and ethics classrooms. Maybe how do we go that next step? The seven strategies developed at Oxford Character Project and also work happening at Wake Forest, really helpful tool. Thinking about how we might, again, use these as a supplement to a lot of the things we're already doing in philosophy classrooms if we want to foster moral and intellectual virtue growth really happening in our classrooms and outside of our classrooms. On the intellectual character side, and I'm sorry, I'm going against what I said, but I will just say that I will say that something that's been really helpful for me for thinking about intellectual virtues is really drawing from Jason Behr's work at Loyola Marymount, and of course, the Intellectual Virtues Academy, coming up with a list of kind of a sense of what we want the intellectual virtues to be. And then similar to the way I think the VIA strengths have really helped us kind of make it practicable and practicable and making it really come alive in classrooms. I think that thinking routines really, really can help for intellectual virtues. Is having they've at least been really helpful for me again to also in a sense kind of develop the kind of daily practices that really help students to start actually making these come alive. So that's things like See, Think, Wonder, things like Connect, Extend, Challenge, in addition to the things that we already kind of traditionally do in philosophy classrooms. Thank you so much. I know that was a ton, really, really fast. And I'm really looking forward to connecting with you all. And so really, I think the overarching question is how do you foster more intellectual virtues in your classroom work and life? And I'm going to stop sharing there.